exposing the shocking doping story involving Alex Eala in tennis. Following an unlikely comeback, the coach requests a test. The whole thing was disclosed. Greetings from Court Vision Plus once again. This is your one-stop shop for the most shocking, uncensored and shocking tennis news that the mainstream media is too afraid to cover. Don't assume you've seen everything the WTA Tour has to offer, because what happened in Abu Dhabi is more than simply a game of tennis. This is a full-fledged scandal, a real-life conspiracy theory, and a dispute so fierce that it has left coaches furious, officials in disarray, and a whole country holding its breath. We're going to go right into a story that has it all. A test result that left everyone stunned, a stunning comeback, allegations of cheating, and private emergency meetings. Our topic today is 20-year-old Filipino phenom Alex Eala, who has been blazing up the tennis globe. We are referring to the battle-hardened Belarusian veteran Ali Alexandra Sasnovich, who believed she had an easy victory in the bag. Most significantly, we're discussing what transpired right after their matchup in the second round of the esteemed Mubadala Abu Dhabi Open. A confrontation that threatened to eclipse the entire competition because it was so intense and unprecedented. Imagine this. The coaching staff stormed into the tournament referee's office, demanding answers and refusing to leave. They were so shocked by what they had just seen on the court that they made an urgent demand for an immediate drug test. Claims that a player's performance required pharmacological enhancement, since it was so remarkable and superhuman. Then came the shocking results that left the tennis community in complete amazement and accusers in disbelief. You have seen great comebacks before. When it looks like everything is gone, you've witnessed gamers search far and uncover that extra item. However, have you ever witnessed a comeback so amazing and physically unfeasible that the entire opposing side genuinely refused to believe it was a natural one? Folks, that's precisely what we're up against here. This isn't exaggerated. Clickbait is not what this is authentic. Away from the cameras, away from the applauding spectators, and away from a drama that rivals anything Hollywood could produce, it took place in the back rooms and hallways of Zad Sports City. We are currently digging deep into the trenches. We are dissecting the match that sparked this controversy, pinpointing the exact moment the alleged suspicious surge happened, analysing the furious altercation that broke out backstage, and exposing the shocking test results that were delivered just hours before the quarterfinals were scheduled to start. We also have the most recent information on what transpired next, including Eala's devastating rematch with the formidable Katerina Alexandrova. Was the young Filipino celebrity too emotionally spent from the charges to give her best effort in competition? Was there a toll that no amount of physical training could have prepared her for from the weight of protecting her integrity? All of these questions and more are being addressed. This is the tale that has everyone talking, so grab your favorite snack, settle down, and be sure to hit the subscribe button right now. The tale that reveals the murky side of tennis competition. Additionally, the story demonstrates that Alex Eala is more than just a rising star. Rather, she is a force so powerful that her adversaries believe she must be superhuman. Let's examine the specifics of what actually transpired in Abu Dhabi. We must correctly set the scene in order to fully comprehend why this accusation rocked the tennis world. The 2026 Mubadala Abu Dhabi Open isn't just a casual show. With millions in prize money and ranking points that might make or break a player's season, this is a top-tier WTA 500 tournament. There was an abundance of skill on the field. On the hard courts of the United Arab Emirates, you had top 10 mains, previous Grand Slam champions, and eager new players fighting for supremacy. This is one of the most competitive early-season competitions on the schedule, with names like Elena Rybakina and Daria Kasatkina at the top of the draw. And Alex Eala comes next. All season long, the 20-year-old pride of the Philippines has been attracting attention. She is no longer the bright young champion that everyone keeps whispering about. As a player who has demonstrated that she can compete with and even beat the top 50 opponents on any given day, she is a serious contender. Speed, accuracy, and an uncompromising spirit of competition are the cornerstones of her game, which has won her millions of fans in Asia and beyond. She carries the aspirations and expectations of a whole country with her every time she takes the court, and she has shown incredible maturity and grace in managing that strain. However, in terms of pure experience, Eala was still viewed as the underdog going into her matchup with Alexandra Sasnovich in the second round. Sasnovich is a shrewd veteran who has more than 10 years of WTA Tour experience. When it comes to taking down younger, less seasoned opponents, she has seen it all, done it all, and knows every tactic in the book. It is well known that the Belarusian is a tough out. a person who forces you to earn every point. Someone who can exhaust you mentally and physically to the point that you beg for the bout to cease. She is a terror to play against because of her powerful ground strokes and superb court positioning, especially for players who lack the mental toughness to handle her constant pressure. The match started just as the analysts and experts had predicted. Sasnovich threw herself into it, enforcing her will on the younger player right away. She made Ella appear as like she didn't belong on the same court by painting the lines with surgical accuracy, moving her from corner to corner like a puppet on chains, and generally giving the impression that she didn't belong there. An outstanding masterclass in veteran dominance was displayed in the first set. 6-2, Sasnovich won it convincingly, making it appear quite effortless. Ella appeared utterly disoriented. She moved almost languidly, her timing was questionable and her footwork was off. She had the appearance of a player who had remained up too late the previous evening, a player who was mentally exhausted before the game was even over. We thought we were watching a standard demolition, the type of straight-set defeat that occurs countless of times per tournament when an overeager teenager takes on a seasoned veteran. In the second set, however, something changed. Ella began to discover her range. She improved her ability to interpret Sasnovich's patterns, predicting the Belarusian's shot placement. More significantly, she began interacting with the audience, absorbing their enthusiasm in a way that changed the stadium's whole ambience. The Filipino contingent in Abu Dhabi is very legendary, so let's take a moment to discuss that audience. They take part in tennis matches rather than only watching them. They produce an energy that can take their player to new heights through singing, chanting, waving flags, and other actions. Even the most seasoned players would have been terrified by the stadium's explosion of passion and noise when Ella began pumping her fist and urging them to get louder. Refusing to leave quietly, Ella fought her way back into the match. The momentum abruptly changed after she solidified the break and broke Sasnovich's serve. In order to tie the match and force a decisive third set, the Filipino sensation took the second set 6-4. As Eala finally displayed the kind of grit and drive everyone knew she possessed, the audience was electrified, standing and cheering in praise as she made her way to her chair. Well, this is a typical tennis fair, isn't it? A veteran had a great start. We're going to a third set match to decide who advances when the younger guy battles back. Just two players who aren't giving up playing strong, competitive tennis, nothing very out of the ordinary yet. However, this is the exact point at which our narrative abruptly shifts into an area that defies easy explanation. The controversy starts at this point. This is the source of the abnormalities charges. Sasnovich evidently decided she had let this match get too close for comfort at the start of the third set. She would not allow her tournament to be ruined by a young upstart. Her level rose to heights she hadn't attained in the first 2 sets as she stepped on the gas pedal with authority. She instantly broke Ella's serve. She then comfortably held her own service game. Then, with ruthless efficiency, she broke Ella once more. Alexandra Sasnovich had sprinted out to a dominating 4-0 lead in the decisive set for love in a third set before anyone in the arena could even comprehend what was happening, before Ella's coaching staff could issue a medical timeout or offer any tactical advice. Give it some time to sink in. That scoreline in a final set is practically a death sentence in professional tennis. The numbers are ruthless. A player loses fewer than 1% of the time when they lose to love in a deciding set against a player ranked in the top 100. It's so unlikely that bookmakers hardly pay out bets at that moment, but it's not impossible. This truth was reflected in Ella's body language. Her shoulders were beginning to slightly sag. It was as though the fire that had blazed so brilliantly in the second set was fading. The crowd, which had been so boisterous only minutes before, had suddenly become eerily still, as though they were all lamenting the conclusion of their hero's tournament run. The mood was entirely different in the Sasnovich player box. Her coach was clearly at ease, reclining in his chair with the demeanor of someone who had already mentally shifted to getting ready for the next game. The quarterfinals were on their minds. They were considering their next opponent. Most likely they were considering the restaurant where they had celebrated that night. For all practical purposes, the match was over. Ella had put up a brave fight, but as is so common in professional sports, consistency and expertise had prevailed. After that, something occurred that no one in the Sasnovich camp, no one at that stadium, and no one watching on TV could have foreseen or anticipated. In front of everyone, Alex Eala changed. This particular moment, the change from 4-love down to what followed, represents the core of the entire problem, according to several people with knowledge of the matter, sources who later served as the foundation for the explosive complaint that would be made following the match. The Sasnovich coaching team would later characterize this series of events as profoundly strange, impossible, and unnatural. It wasn't only that Eala became a better tennis player. Every player has times when, with pure willpower and perseverance, they find an extra gear and improve their game. That's what makes sports so wonderful. Witnesses, however, reported seeing more than just typical competitive greatness in those next few games. They detailed this abrupt, startling, and uncanny change in Eala's whole physical output that appeared to go against the fundamental principles of human endurance and physiology. Recall that Eala had been on the court for almost 2 hours at this point in the game. In an attempt to keep up with Sasnovich's hard ground strokes, she had spent that time sprinting from corner to corner, lunging for drop shots, sliding into defensive positions, and generally using a tremendous amount of energy. She ought to have been hitting the wall at this very moment by all fair standards. She ought to have had a heavy leg. Her shot ought to have slowed down. With every game that went by, her movement ought to have become more strained and slower. When people push their bodies to the limit, that is what happens to them. Muscles burn, fatigue sets in, and reaction time slows. It is unavoidable. However, Alex Eala appeared as though she had just stepped onto the court following a week of rest and recuperation, rather than faltering under the mental and physical strain of losing by 4 loves in a third set. At the conclusion of the second set, her footwork appeared ponderous and plotting, but it suddenly turned accurate and lightning fast. The ball was exploding violently off her racket as her ground strokes, which should have been losing velocity, were increasing speed. Most notably to all onlookers, her movement between points, her return to the baseline, and her bounce on her toes, while awaiting serve all gave the impression that she was a player whose energy levels had somehow been fully restored. Eala made it 4-1 by holding serve. All right, maybe she was just buying herself one more game before the eventual end by playing a good service game. Nothing overly concerning just yet. It was 4-2 and then she broke Sasnovich's serve. The Belarusian appeared a little irritated now, maybe irritated that she was unable to complete what ought to have been a simple finish, but she was unconcerned. Throughout her career, she had been in this situation hundreds of times. Before losing, players always make one final, frantic effort. The pressure would immediately return to Ella's shoulders if she could just hold serve. The tension within that stadium had escalated to nearly intolerable levels, but Eala held again, and now the score was 4-3. After prepared to comfort themselves with moral victory speeches about their girl's valiant battle, the Filipino fans were immediately back on their feet, yelling at the ball to land inside the lines. Sasnovich could feel the momentum ebbing away from her with every point that went by. It had entirely flipped, but during that 4-3 match, there was a single point and a single exchange that raised serious concerns in the Sasnovich player box. The incident would later be used as the main piece of evidence in the official complaint on the unusual physical performance. Sasnovich made what should have been a game-saving shot in a desperate attempt to halt the bleeding and regain control of the match. She made a flawless drop shot. It's one of those fragile dying balls that hardly make it through the net before dying on the court with virtually little bounce. It was a classic illustration of touch and feel, the kind of shot that ought to have one hands down. By the time Sasnovich touched the ball, Alex Eala was miles behind the baseline. A deep, hefty ground stroke had just driven her back, and she was in a defensive position. She should never have been able to make that drop shot by any standard metric of physics, geometry, and human athletic ability. It was too far away. There was not enough time. She'd been heading in the wrong way. Sasnovich should have been the clear winner, the type of shot that shifts momentum back your way and crushes an opponent's spirit. Eala did more than simply reach the ball, though. Several courtside spectators, including journalists and even non-fans, described what followed as one of the most spectacular demonstrations of athleticism and speed they had ever seen on a tennis court. With an acceleration surge, Eala bounded forward, resembling an Olympic sprinter right out of the starting blocks. With her legs pumping mechanically and her eyes laser-focused on that dying ball, she completely ate up the space between herself and the net. Despite the urgent nature of the retrieve, she managed to retain perfect balance and timing as she slipped into the shot, flicking the ball down the line with flawless accuracy. Sasnovich was immobile and unable to even try a reaction as the shot fell precisely on the baseline and kissed the line with unfathomable accuracy. The audience went completely crazy. The type of point that is shown on highlight reels for years was this one, the kind of incident that shapes careers and is immortalized in tennis legends. However, the response was very different in the Sasnovich player box. The coach's easy posture gave way to tight strain as he sat bolt upright in his chair. Witnesses reportedly characterized his demeanor as a mix of mistrust and disbelief as he gazed at Sasnovich. Some lip readers later reported that Sasnovich murmured something like, "How is that possible?" as she stood on the court, staring straight back at her coach with wide eyes. That one encounter had sown the seeds of suspicion, uncertainty, and eventually accusation. The momentum of the comeback was unrelenting. Eala leveled the match for everyone by breaking serve once more. After that, she held to take a 5-4 lead, putting herself within one game of pulling off one of the most unlikely comebacks in recent WTA history. With the Filipino contingent creating an atmosphere more akin to a sold-out football game than a tennis tournament, the stadium was trembling with noise. The Sasnovich camp, meanwhile, was observing with increasing anxiety and suspicion as the throng rejoiced and Eala pumped her hands in victory. They were focusing on details that the average fan would overlook. They saw how Eala ran between places without exhibiting any symptoms of laboured breathing. They were noticing that after 3 hours of intense tennis, her ground strokes should have been slowing down, but instead they were keeping up or even picking up speed. Her eyes seemed abnormally dilated, and she was moving almost hyperactively between spots, jumping and squirming with energy that seemed impossible under the conditions they were seeing. Meanwhile, the strain and physical strain of the match were clearly causing Sasnovich to wilt. After lengthy rallies, she was having trouble breathing. After every point, she limped back to her position, her legs appearing heavy. After hours of fierce physical struggle, she was exhibiting all the typical signs of human exhaustion. She was going through what all tennis players go through in the closing moments of a grueling 3-set match: fatigue, aches in the muscles, confusion, and a strong wish for it to end. Eala, however, was bouncing. Eala was on the go. Eala appeared to be able to play for 3 more hours without becoming tired. With everything on the line, the match unavoidably went to a 3rd-set tiebreaker and winner, take all. Alex remained unflinching even though he was up against her, facing match point and facing elimination after overcoming the threat of defeat. There was no trace of uncertainty or fear on her face. With a well-placed approach shot, Sasnovich appeared to have finally closed the door, but Ella's daring, flawlessly executed drive volley had the Belarusian shaking her head in exasperated despair. With sheer audacity and talent, the young Filipino saved match point. Subsequently completed one of the most incredible comebacks the tour had witnessed this season by winning the tiebreaker 7-5. Pandemonium erupted across the stadium. Tears were running down their faces as fans jumped up and down, hugged strangers, and waved Philippine flags. Alex Eala screamed in relief and triumph as she fell to her knees on the court, burying her face with her hands. It was the year's biggest comeback, possibly the biggest comeback of her career thus far. In a decisive set, a 4-love disadvantage was totally eliminated. Steely nerves preserved a match point, an enduring triumph, the type of victory that characterizes a player's progression from a prospect to a serious contender. Behind the scenes, away from the cameras and the festivities, something sinister and repulsive was already simmering, while Eala was signing autographs, taking selfies, and enjoying the adoration of her devoted followers. You were not shown this portion of the narrative in the television broadcasts. The entire tour has been rocked by this explosive development, which has also brought up important issues of sportsmanship procedure, and the extent to which a team would go when they are unable to accept defeat. Several people with first-hand knowledge of the matter, who spoke on condition of anonymity because the accusations were delicate, claim that something extraordinary happened right after the obligatory handshake at the net, which was noticeably cold and formal on the Sasnovich side. The typical post-match protocol was not followed by Sasnovich's coach. He didn't gather his belongings. He did not return to the hotel to rest and get ready for the next competition. Instead, with a sense of urgency and barely controlled rage that left everyone in his wake in complete shock, he marched straight to the tournament referee's office. Several witnesses reported seeing the coach clearly upset, his face flushed with wrath and rage. According to reports, he refused to leave until his issues were acknowledged and resolved, demanding an urgent meeting with the chief tournament referee and the on-duty WTA supervisor. He apparently became more adamant when officials suggested that he submit a formal protest through the proper procedures and return the next day, claiming that what he had just observed necessitated immediate action and that any delay could jeopardize the tournament's integrity. He filed a complaint that was both audacious and offensive to Alex Eala. Instead of asking for a random test, the Sasnovich coaching staff formally sought an urgent, targeted emergency doping test for the Filipino player. A direct accusatory demand, not a customary post-match ritual, based only on their conviction that what they had just seen on the court could not have been accomplished by natural methods. In their formal written complaint, they gave a startlingly thorough and specific justification. They claimed that Eala's abrupt physical change in the third set, her unusual acceleration and speed, and the sharp increase in energy levels following over 2 hours of intensive competition were all incompatible with human physiological capacities. They claimed that no athlete, regardless of fitness level, could travel so much territory that quickly after playing for that long without pharmacological aid, citing film evidence of that pivotal drop shot retrieval at 43. They observed her extremely dilated pupils when shown on the large screen, her almost frenzied activity in the dying moments of the match between points, and her absence of heavy breathing throughout the tiebreaker. The 20-year-old Filipino phenom was essentially being officially accused by the Sasnovich side of utilizing a performance-enhancing substance to obtain an unfair advantage in those crucial closing seconds of the match. They were disputing that Eala had not outperformed them in terms of talent, willpower, and mental toughness. They were saying that she had outperformed them by using illegal drugs, cheating, and artificial augmentation to give her skills that a clean athlete could not. Making such a serious charge was quite difficult, particularly right after a defeat. Doping accusations are the most devastating possibility in the world of professional tennis. They instantly ruin reputations. Even when they are shown to be untrue, the shadows they cast never completely go away. More quickly than any on-court failure could, they have the power to destroy careers, sabotage sponsorship agreements, and sway public opinion against a player. It says volumes about the depth of their resentment and reluctance to accept defeat, or even their real earnest amazement at what they had just experienced, that a seasoned coaching staff would use this weapon against a young rising star, just after a devastating loss. The suggestion apparently caught tournament officials completely off guard. Random selections or scheduled testing, as part of regular tour operations, are the two most common doping procedures in professional tennis. Extremely uncommon and contentious from a procedural and ethical perspective is an emergency demand for an instant targeted test based just on a coach's post-match suspicions. It makes the surroundings extremely unfriendly. It suggests that everything the opponent had worked for was a falsehood and that their success wasn't real. It contaminates the foundation of sportsmanship that should support competitive sports. But as they ought to, the WTA takes honesty and fair competition very seriously. The anti-doping machinery was promptly put into motion after a player's coaching staff filed a formal complaint with specific charges regarding questionable physical performance. Regardless of how awkward or unusual the scenario might be, officials were forced to take action. Now, for a moment, put yourself in Alex Eala's shoes. Imagine yourself in her position. You just pulled off your biggest career comeback, your life's greatest comeback perhaps. You've overcome what should have been an insurmountable 4-love disadvantage. A match point has been saved against you. You've achieved a triumph that seems predestined, as if the stars were aligning to honor your perseverance and willpower. The rush of excitement and victory is still coming to you. The sound of thousands of supporters chanting your name can still be heard as you wipe away your happy tears. As you make your way back to the locker room, you're considering how you'll commemorate this amazing occasion with your family, your teammates, and your Filipino supporters. You are confronted by grim-faced officials who tell you that you are being accused of cheating, rather than being able to celebrate. That someone is questioning your biggest victory. That a formal investigation is being conducted into your integrity as an athlete. Your opponent's squad believes you couldn't be that good naturally, so instead of celebrating, you have to submit a urine sample for an emergency drug test right away. This would be disastrous for the majority of young athletes. The euphoria of victory would be shattered. It would sow uncertainty and insecurity seeds that may never completely sprout. Numerous players would respond with tears, rage, demands to know the identity of the accuser, and threats of legal action. For ethical reasons, some might decline to assist, claiming that acquiescing to such a ludicrous charge lends it credence it does not merit. But in this session, Alex Eala demonstrated maturity way beyond her 20 years of age. She didn't panic, according to others familiar with her reaction.